Have you ever found yourself caught between the crossfire of two superstitious people when they are sharing examples of coinky dinkies or synchronicities that have occurred to them in their recent lives? And you often find that what happens is it's like a currency between them. They start to vibe off each other, and then they kind of like story top. They're kind of like, oh, you think you've got fucking synchronicities? Check this out. They're like, yeah, babe. When I was on the playa at Burning Man, I met some other bitch called Sunflower Bean. We had the same name, the same made up name for your IG handle. She was Sunflower Bean 3914, and I was Sunflower Bean 4256. Sunflower Bean. What's that from? Oh, that's that band from New York City. That's a synchronicity because that was in my subconscious somewhere. Yeah, and then the other person will be like, "Oh yeah, here's an example of something else that happened to me." So it got me thinking: is that like if you are a superstitious person, you are kind of like a synchronicity junkie. How deep and far and wide are you looking? Like what? The better question is more like, what are you overlooking in respect to things that happen at the same time that could be construed as connected? Here's an example, right? I was at the gym the other day, not to brag, but yeah, doing a bit of the old eccentric pull ups. And I was listening to a podcast, and uh, on the podcast, the person was talking about Jennifer Coolidge's character on The White Lotus season 2. And as she said season 2, the word 2, I was counting reps silently in my head, and I was like, 2, as I came down for my second eccentric pull up. Because I'm too out there to do fucking straight up and down pull ups. I'm gonna do eccentric. I'm gonna do Kramer type of pull ups, screaming the N word as you're doing a pull up. Hello. Uh but yeah, it got me thinking. I was like, okay, if I was a synchronicity junkie, would I count that as a coinkydink, as the universe being like, all right, at this particular moment in the podcast I was listening to, does that mean that, you know, like, is there something to do with the, and then as I was doing this exercise and counting in my head, at the exact same moment I heard the number 2, does that mean that there's some significance for 2? Should I be thinking about 2? Should I be splitting myself in 2? Should I have 2 fucking post workout protein shakes? Do I need to take a dump? Do I need a fucking number 2? Like what's 2 happening? Well, what's happening to me with that number? Like, how am I involved, essentially? But there could be another person where it's been like, no, I need to essentially have something outrageous for me to consider a coinky dinky or a synchronicity. I have to be, yeah, walking across the desert, and I meet someone exactly like me who's from the same hometown, and we're going to the same, you know, like, it has to be outrageously unique for me to pay attention. Or do you start off that person where you're like, okay, I don't believe in any of this shit, and then something wild happens to you, and then you're like, whoa, man, never considered the possibility. And then that kind of snowballs from there. You start looking for it, and because you're looking for it, it starts happening more. I don't know, but I feel like ultimately I'm closed off to this type of shit, because I feel like an important part of growing up is to kill the child that lives within you. It's a necessary part of growing up. And it's really kind of like it's a satisfying thing in a sense, because you kind of look back on your childhood at your naivete, the fact that you felt like you were the center of the universe. And if you had a decent upbringing, you can kind of live within that realm for, let's say, 10 or so years. And that's an amazing experience, right? It's a great bubble to live within. But then the cunts who don't grow out of that and it doesn't work out for them, like the mummy and daddy, even if they've got money and connections and you remain close to them, you're going to be stunted if you never fully accept that you're not the center of the universe. So you gotta, uh, in a weird way, kind of smash meaning. You gotta get a fucking wrecking ball and kind of like get rid of all the meaning in your life, pretty much. Because of course you have to be like, all right, I'm not the center of the universe, but I'm watching this movie from this perspective. So let's ensure that you're almost like a camera for life or something. That's the kind of difference I would see, is that like as a child you think you're like the director and the producer and the star of the show. I think eventually you gotta like look at yourself as more like a camera. So therefore you want to like position the camera in useful and interesting parts of the movie that's unfolding around you. But you're not really like I guess you're part of the production. You need a good camera to capture good parts of the movie in theory, but you just need to ensure that the camera doesn't get too banged up, and that therein comes that's why you need the ego, right? To take care of yourself, to make sure that you change the lens over every so often, and yada yada yada. But you just go from that childhood perspective of like, I'm Orson fucking Welles, I'm doing everything, to just be like, no, I'm a humble camera that kind of has some capacity to think for itself. And I'm just trying to be part of the whole production thing that's going on. But I feel like the believers in the synchronicities and the kind of like everything's connected, man, they have there's clearly like a excess meaning. There's like leftovers from childhood. Mummy and daddy have left them, but they've got all the meaning stuff still wrapped up. Some people can push that towards God. Sometimes you can push that towards a career or a romantic relations or something or other. But generally, I find that it's kind of like the superstition can kind of like it's like a net that can catch the excess stuff that's over spilling. And because let's face it, it is fucking like if you do have a lot of fucking, you feel like I need to find meaning, you're gonna fucking struggle to find it. Modern life is rubbish, as Blur famously said. It's true. It is fucking it is shit in many different ways. And so if you've got all this like you want to be part of a fairy tale, for a while on Instagram, people were like selling somewhat of a dream. And it seemed kind of like, it seemed interesting. It seemed kind of like, wow, are people living these lives? But now Instagram's been around for 10 or so years. You kind of realize you're like, oh no, it wasn't their story or their what was happening in the aesthetics of their lives. It was more just the newfangledness of the platform that was actually exciting. So the early adopters on that kind of made you believe that they were leading this fairy tale existence. You're like, no, they're just the average schmuck like you and I. They're just early adopters, mate. But yeah, that's my feeling, is that those that are kind of like those people that would be doing the eccentric pull-ups and then look for number two, they're the people who are kind of like the synchronicity junkies or something, where they're like they're that would, I don't know, I can kind of see the fun in it in a sense, where it's like, what does this mean now? Ooh, like kind of, and it's also weirdly self-directed as well, where you kind of like can still choose to pay attention to certain things, ignore other things as well, where you're still kind of playing God, but also just like, yeah, choose your own adventure aspect to it. Whereas I'm just a fucking humble camera over here, trying to fucking get some good B-roll for the production that's occurring around me. All right, that's it for this one. Catch you on the next one.